And it took them late into the night to get it done, but Senate Republicans passed an overhaul of the tax code last weekend. After last-minute negotiations, the 497-page draft finally made it into lawmakers' hands mere hours before the vote. There were even handwritten edits and sections slashed. Both of Colorado's senators were in D.C. for the vote. Their opinions, as you can imagine, on this bill could not be more different.
This reform will bring the kind of relief that Americans have been demanding.
They're not paying for it. They are borrowing the money from middle-class families all over the country.
Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper also weighing in, calling the tax code pathetic. Here to discuss the implications of this plan and what it could mean for Colorado is Jeff Wasden from the Colorado Business Roundtable. Jeff, good to see you.
It's great to see you. Thanks for having me back.
You bet. A lot of passion on this issue, especially because taxes are really a pocketbook issue. But I think one issue that still needs to be resolved are kind of the intricacies and the fine print of this legislation. There's a lot of concern that the House version, the Senate version can't be reconciled, and that from a technical standpoint, can this really be executed?
Absolutely, and I think this is the type of reforms that Americans need, that Coloradans need. It's a pro-growth tax reform package. And when we were here last, obviously, we were talking about some of the tenets of this reform package. Certainly now the House and Senate have gone through and passed this. There's still work to be done. The House and Senate needed to pass actually conference committee instructions. There's a lot of bills that actually do get passed that never make it to the president's desk. That happened last night. Both Leader McConnell has appointed his committee. Speaker Ryan has appointed his committee, chaired by Ways and Means Kevin Brady. They're in conference. They're in those types of discussions to reconcile. And there are significant differences between the House and Senate plans. There's no doubt.
So you talk to business leaders all the time. I mean, is there whispering or perhaps even outright discussion that even though we have achieved thus far, when it comes to execution, will this really happen?
There's a great optimism, and I think it's an imperative for the business community to remain competitive. Globally speaking, when you look at the industrialized nations and where we fit in our corporate tax code, we're falling behind, which is an impediment to business being able to move and continue to grow, to put more Coloradans or Americans back to work, and to create the kind of wages that we need. If you look at the 10 countries with the highest tax rate, their GDP is about 1%. If you look at those industrialized nations, those same 10 countries with the lowest tax rate, they're close to 4%. Tax cuts do matter. It will lead to higher wages and increased growth, and I think people understand that and the importance of getting this done. I also think not only are we seeing the changes with the corporate tax rate and the pass-throughs on the business side, but we're also seeing some significant reforms on the middle class. This is a middle-class tax cut as well as it is corporate reform and business reform. You're looking at doubling standard deductions. You're looking at the child care or the child tax credit being doubled, looking at lowering the rates on working Americans. So coupling those two together will provide the type of systematic, sustainable, long-term, meaningful growth that I think will spur this economy and put more Americans back to work, put more money in people's pockets, which is very important.
Yeah, with that said, there is criticism that in the end, these deductions, these new configurations, if you will not trickle down to the middle class. You heard Senator Bennett, you heard the governor call this pathetic. Obviously, if you have strong business, the hope is that everyone benefits, but still there's such skepticism that it will trickle down to the people who need it most.
If you look at the last 3 presidents that had significant tax cuts during their regime, the Bush tax cut created about 8 million jobs over 5 years, according to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. The Reagan cuts put about 15 million Americans back to work. Kennedy put about 12 million in that 5-year span. It will work. It will put more money in Americans' pockets. But as we talked about, Mark, we still have to reconcile a lot of work here. You've got differences in the rates and the brackets. There's some permanency issues and sunset clauses that are being looked at, differences in how we treat pass-through entities. You also have the Senate plan that had the Obamacare mandate repeal that was in there, which is a significant issue. There's actually discussions right now. I know there was a lot of work around the state and local tax, property tax, discussions about how we lower those, change those, eliminate those, the impact on high tax states. New York, New Jersey, California. There's a discussion going on right now is, can you give a $10,000 deduction, allow people to choose that depending on where your state is. Again, that's part of going through the regular rule of order, and that's what this process has been about. That's why it was so important that the House and Senate followed regular rule to make sure that we allow these changes to take place and allow them to sit down in conference and come up with those significant issues. The one thing that's, I know the business community talks a little bit about, the Senate plan actually was delaying the implementation of the corporate tax cuts till 2019, which is a little problematic, just as much as on the individual side. The sunset provisions of the individual rates that would expire in 2016. And so I think those are things that need to be worked out. If we're going to do this, we need to swing for the fences and make sure that this is meaningful and does what we need to do to remain competitive.
In 10 seconds, you're on the front lines, you talk to business people every day. What is the #1 question they have?
Will this get done? And the answer is yes. President Trump would like to see this bill delivered by Christmas. We are optimistic. It needs to get done for Colorado working families all across this great state so we can continue to put them back to work and spur this economy.
We'll see what happens when we talk to you next.
Thanks.
Jeff, thanks for coming in this morning.
Love it.
Stay with us. We're talking about hot topics when we come right back.